Hello, my name is Milagros Sandoval. I am Peruvian. I'm Director of Climate Change Mitigation from the Ministry of Environment of Peru. As well, I'm the co-facilitator for the Coronivia Joint Work on Agriculture in the UNFCCC negotiations. And I welcome you to this very interesting event with wonderful panelists. And then we're going to speak about something that probably you all love and know about, that is the Amazon, and the importance of the Amazon for climate change, and especially from where we are now in these UNFCCC negotiations, and how the Amazon plays such an important role in this process. I would like just to mention a few quick remarks related that the Amazon basin holds the largest extension of tropical forests in the world, with exceptional natural and cultural richness. It is home to key global ecological and climate processes which make the forests, wetlands, and related ecosystems crucial assets for stabilizing the global climate. The Amazon basin also is core to the component of cooperation between the GEF, or the GEF, and the GCF. So definitely that's something important that we're going to discuss with our panelists. So let me introduce the panelists. Today we have representatives of governments, private sector, and of financial mechanisms of the conventions, which are definitely important in this process of climate change, and how they support the processes related to implementing and designing key strategies for climate change mitigation and adaptation. So we have our colleagues from the GCF, Mr. Javier Manzanares, that's the Deputy Executive Director from the Green Climate Fund. We have Gustavo Fonseca, that is the Director of Programs from the Global Environmental Facility. And we have Juan Pablo Bonilla, that's IDB's Climate Change and Sustainable Development Sector. Other colleagues will be joining. As you know, this is a different COP, so we are trying to be flexible on the way in which we are organizing ourselves in this process. So later on, we will be also coming to the panel. Wonderful. I now have Vice Minister. Please join us. No worries. We also have Nicolás Galarza, Vice Minister of the Environment of Colombia. Wonderful to join us. I know everybody's running around, so no worries. We are super flexible. We will also have in our panel, hopefully, Andrea Encalada, that is co-chair of the Science Panel for the Amazon and professor at the San Francisco de Quito University of Ecuador. And we will also have Mr. Marco van der Rie, who is Executive Director for the Development at the Nature Conservancy in Latin America, who will be joining us right after, and Ms. Denise Hills, Global Sustainable Director of Natura. Thank you very much for joining us, colleagues. I will start the panel, and let's start the panel with Javier. Javier, the Amazon region is an important area of investment for the GCF. How is the GCF supporting Amazon countries mitigate and adapt to climate change? I know you have to run to another meeting, so I'll make the two questions for you in this round. From the GCF perspective, what will the GCF and GEF partnership bring to the Amazon countries that they did not already have? Thank you, Javier. You have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Milagros. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for the flexibility, and thank you, my colleagues, panelists, Vice Minister Nicolás, Gustavo, Juan Pablo. Also, thank you very much for letting me come in first. I would like to start by sharing with you another fairly powerful indicator, Milagros, that you were describing, the Amazon, and that is the Amazon holds 20% of the world's river fresh water. That's fairly impressive. And what does it mean for the GCF? What does it imply? Do we go forward with our commitment to the Amazon? Well, let me share with you that the GCF so far has approved about $10 billion in projects, and nearly 10% of our portfolio is to the Amazon and to the countries of the Amazon, whether it's on water, agriculture, whether it's on protection of forest. So, and that is also thanks to our partnership with IDB. Within those, it's $955 million dedicated to the Amazon. Our board recently approved participation from the GCF with instruments of grant, loans, and equity of $278 million on the fund, the Bioeconomy Amazon Fund, that's structured by IDB. So we are in partnership, definitely, and we are taking a three-pronged approach, Milagros, on the Amazon. I'm referring to the protection of forest. That is to keep ecosystems healthy. Number one, restoration of ecosystems to increase the resilience. And number three, some sustainable management of landscapes with the purpose to increase productivity. And in this connection, also our partnership with GEF is of the essence. Gustavo, we recognize very much your experience in the Amazon of decades. So in partnering with the GEF for the GCF, this is essential. We want to increment knowledge sharing, and in this case coming from GEF, with the purpose to comply also with our mandate of scaling up. So the successful experience for decades with the GEF will be extremely useful for the GCF to conduct also our business mandate. And that is to say, a programmatic approach that includes as a priorities indigenous people. It also includes the crowding in of the private sector. Very importantly, to make sure that we go to smallholders, private sector, smallholders for the GCF adaptation as well. And all of this we can do it and we can only do it in partnership with IDB in this context, and with GEF, also with a view of increasing the complementarity and coherence of peer sister funds. And with this, I would like to finalize this thanking everyone. Milagros, thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Javier. You have definitely highlighted very important issues related, for example, of how new and additional funding is important for this process, and how the GCF and the GEF are collaborating together for this process, and definitely highlighting the role of the private sector in overall for this process to continue and to have really mitigation and adaptation outcomes that is in overall the goal of reaching what we have set under the Paris Agreement. So now let's hear from Gustavo. Gustavo, the GEF has a long history of collaboration with the Amazon countries. Actually, we are sitting here, two big Amazon countries that definitely are Amazon Andes countries, right? Highlighting the role of this process. Could you please describe three main achievements of the GEF's funding flowing to the Amazon basin? What are the challenges to ensure long-term finance?
Thank you, Milagros, and thanks to Javier for being here with us, and for Juan Pablo and the country representatives. It's fantastic to be here to discuss the future of the Amazon. You mentioned, Milagros, about being the largest tropical forest in the world, but what's really at stake in the Amazon? If you have read and believe that there are planetary boundaries, the Amazon is one of the area-based planetary boundaries that exist today. In other words, a lot of the climate in the region and globally depends on a healthy ecosystem in the Amazon. The Amazon holds 30% of all species in the planet, a vast majority species that are endemic, that only occur there. And the Amazon is a very delicate system. And if you have been reading what's happening lately with deforestation in the Amazon, scientists are starting to perceive that, to monitor that during droughts, because droughts exist and during El Nino years, instead of being a carbon source, the Amazon is becoming a carbon sink. So in other words, in the fringes of the Amazon and where things are starting to become very vulnerable to climate change and to fires and deforestation, that service that the Amazon provided before is no longer functioning. So if I'm correct in quoting the studies, during 4 months out of the year now, the Amazon became a net emitter of CO2 and not a net sink. So there's a lot in the agenda for the Amazon that we need collectively to come together. And that's why it's so welcoming to have the GCF become a partner in this agenda. You can see here that the GEF is celebrating this year 30 years of work. And from the very beginning, the GEF has been working in the Amazon, initially building capacity of countries, establishing enabling conditions for forest conservation, working with local communities. And eventually, we became much more active in the protection of standing forests to protected areas. And I think the flagship of perhaps this program is the largest, the single largest tropical forest conservation project in the world, which is called ARPA, the Protected Areas of the Amazon, that has now protected 70 million hectares of forest, and after a while decided to provide a fund that's supporting these protected areas with management resources, because we don't want paper parks. We want areas that really functioning in the long haul. More recently, about 6 years ago, we, after supporting individual countries over and over again, we said this is the time to look at the Amazon as a system. Let's bring all these countries together. Let's create something that unites them and that they can share experiences, that they can share data, and they can share the vision for a healthy Amazonian forest that's vibrant and also that provides for its local people. So we created the Amazon Sustainable Landscapes Program that's implemented by the World Bank and has several partners. And this now has 7 countries participating of the basin. And they have met annually to exchange opportunities, and exchange lessons, and exchange financing opportunities. And now we hope that with the GCF joining and with the IDB joining, we can also start expanding beyond, let's say, the protected area to try to find solutions that do not require forests to be deforested for generation of income, but rather are dependent on standing forests. So the bioeconomy model will be such a welcome addition and such a wealthy complement to what has been placed in terms of natural infrastructure represented by protected areas, by indigenous lands, by state reserves and sustainable development reserves. So we hope that this will be quite transformative and this partnership can continue flourishing, and that we all conspire towards the same objectives. The other point that I would make to address your other question, the third, let's say, impactful intervention, is that the Amazon can also be seen not as a forest ecosystem, but as a freshwater ecosystem that just happens to have forests. The dynamic and the dependency of the forest on freshwater is so important and so interdependent that we need to look at that aspect as well. So we're starting to fund projects, that transboundary projects that go beyond just one watershed to becoming, looking at that system as a whole and helping to protect forest. There's a lot of gold mining, artisanal small-scale gold mining going on that's polluting rivers. We need to look at that problem as well. So there's a lot to be done, and it's such a warm feeling to have these additional partners coming together and amplify not only the financial muscle that we collectively have with the countries, but also expanding and building these models. And out of these models, for example, came Herencia Colombia, that's flourishing now, Patrimonio de Peru, and others are coming in line. So let's build on this existing infrastructure and existing platform, and let's all work together towards a common goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. And you mentioned these transboundary projects, and definitely that is important because we don't speak about geographical boundaries, or sometimes political boundaries do not necessarily reflect the geographical zones or the landscapes in which we need to protect and conserve all of these important issues that we have highlighted, and that definitely the Amazon reflects this as an important example. And probably I'll get back to this with our Vice Minister of Colombia, but let's first go to the IDB. Juan Pablo, thanks for coming and for sharing. I just wanted to ask to you, like the GCF, IDB is a significant provider of concessional finance. How to ensure that the concessionality provided by the GCF through an accredited entity such as the IDB reaches the final beneficiaries in the Amazon countries. And we're speaking about indigenous peoples, local communities, those that are definitely supporting the ecosystem services that exist in the Amazon. Thank you very much, Juan Pablo.
Thank you, Milagros, and it's an honor being here with all this panel, speaking about something like the Amazon, that I think if you see the attention that is getting everywhere, I think it's the time to see, as Gustavo, Javier were mentioning, a collective action to Amazon. That it goes beyond governments, has to be also agreed with subnational governments, with private sector, as you said, with local communities. So I think there is a good moment right now, as Gustavo was saying, to coordinate a lot of efforts. The IDB, I would like to start, Milagros, by saying that our Vision 2025 is talking about the recovery of Latin America and the Caribbean post-pandemic. And climate and sustainability, and I'm saying climate and sustainability, biodiversity, nature, everything has to be integral part of that recovery, and having a central part that is the people. We need to link sustainability, climate, biodiversity with jobs and with the recovery. And that is also part of the equation to start talking about natural protected areas. So I like a lot what Gustavo mentioned, that beyond all the efforts that an institution like the GEF has done for many years, and Herencia Colombia is a good example, ARPA, we need to start thinking about a different model for Amazon territories. So as part of the Vision 2025, the presidents of the Amazon requested the IDB about a year and a half ago to develop an initiative for sustainable development in Amazon territories. And that's what we've done in the last year. The IDB just created a unit that our president announced a couple of weeks ago. It's an Amazon coordination unit for the IDB group. And I will explain what that means for us. The IDB has the public side that interacts with governments and subnational governments, the private sector arm of the IDB, IDB Invest, and we have an innovation lab that works with technology and entrepreneurs. And this unit will coordinate the efforts of the IDB group for the initiative. The initiative, we developed the initiative listening a lot, governments, national governments, private sector, local communities, and we have defined 4 pillars of action for the initiative. The first one, as Gustavo mentioned, is bioeconomy, is really supporting the countries for a new productive model. The second pillar is social investment in the Amazon. It's everything related to health, education, employment. The third one is rural development. It's talking about sustainable agriculture, livestock, forestry in Amazon territories. And the fourth one is sustainable infrastructure and sustainable cities. We have an important amount of sustainable cities in the Amazon that we need to also emphasize the work with. And sustainable infra, I think the issue of nature-based solutions as sustainable infrastructure is going to be key, as well as connectivity. We cannot talk about bioeconomy if we don't have connectivity in Amazon territories. So the IDB approved $20 million from our own income for project preparation in the Amazon linked to the 4 pillars, and to do something that we think is going to be very important in the next years, that is developing with the Ministries of Finance and Planning, but at the same time with the subnational plans of action or investment plans for Amazon territories. We have a good example that was the CIF, the Climate Investment Funds. So it's glad to see that we are learning as an institution from what different funds are doing. But I think with the approach of the CIFs to do an investment plan and then see different financial mechanisms is part of what we need to bring as part of the initiative. So we are starting to work with the countries to do these investment plans. And those could be financed by the ADB, but co-financed with other lending institutions. KfW, AFD, and many others have said we would like to be part of that financing. The second part is how to do blended finance and payment for results. So the initiative will have 3 main products: technical support, blended financing, and payment for results. The GCF fund that was just recently approved, and thanks a lot to Javier, Yannick, and the board of the GCF, but in particular to all the Amazon countries that supported the proposal. This was not an IDB proposal. It was a proposal led by Brazil at the beginning, but then had a lot of support from Colombia, Peru, and the other countries of the Amazon. This would link to the pillar 1 of the initiative, is bioeconomy. So the funding from the GCF will be to support bioeconomy. Part of that will be to start working with national development banks in the region to foster bioeconomy. A second component will be to do entrepreneurship of bioeconomy with IDB Lab, with the lab of innovation that we have, to start having that, I would say, ecosystem for a small business related to bioeconomy. And a very important component will be, as you mentioned, Milagros, to work with indigenous communities. We have agreed with COICA to co-create, that's the word I'm using with Gregorio now, a small grant program, seeing what the GEF has done in the past, seeing a very successful program that the CIF has also with direct access to indigenous communities. So we met yesterday with all the representatives of COICA, and we're going to develop that program together as part of the Bioeconomy Fund. And the payment for results, we're going to have a multi-donor. Germany and the Netherlands already announced their support during the COP to pay for results. And we've learned the IDB has another integration initiative that is very important, not about environment, it's about health. It's the Mesoamerican Health Initiative. We had a multi-donor with resources from the Slim Foundation, Gate Foundations. And what we've done with that initiative is that as part of the lending of the ADB, we have included key indicators of success. And once those indicators are accomplished, we bring the grant resources from the multi-donor. So part of the multi-donor of the Amazon initiative will fulfill that role. As part of the lending of the ADB, we'll include some indicators of success, and then payments for results will be made. Finally, we want to develop, as part of our Sustainable Cities Network, a Sustainable Cities Network for the Amazon. We're starting to strengthen the network of research institutions in the Amazon. Tom Lovejoy is helping us a lot for this. And I am very happy to see also that the scientific panel of the Amazon is concluding this work. That's going to be fundamental. And I agree with Emma that we're going to use that as a very important input for the work we're going to do with the research institutions of the Amazon. Private sector. IDB Invest will start working as part of the initiative next year. It's an amazing moment recognizing the role of the private sector banks, not only in Brazil, but in the Amazon. We want to work directly with them and also with companies, private sector companies that want to do sustainable supply chain in the Amazon. So it's a very ambitious initiative. It's not a only 5-year initiative. We're seeing this will be a 10 to 15 year at least. You can ask Gustavo how long he has worked in the Amazon. So we have to respond, I think, to the needs of the Amazon, but also have clarity about that long-term view that collectively we need to address. Finally, Gustavo said something very important, is how to start coordinating actors and resources. I know WWF, CI, and others are preparing proposals to GCF and GEF. I've talked to Carlos Manuel. to also as part of the replenishment of the GF, start aligning efforts with our initiative. So I think there is a great opportunity in the next years to work together for the Amazon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan Pablo. And definitely, you have mentioned the importance of linking and working together in this process. And absolutely, this is fundamental to achieve the goals that we are working. And you mentioned, Juan Pablo, and specifically support to governments. The support to governments is definitely important because they are the ones that lead these processes, that establish and design and implement the policies necessary to address the challenges, the specific national circumstances that each country has. Even in the Amazon, even though we're in the same basin, different countries such as Colombia and my country, Peru, we have different circumstances that need to be addressed. We have challenges, we have different issues to identify. And Vice Minister, thank you for joining us. I would just like to ask you about the Leticia Pact. The Leticia Pact was signed by the heads of state of the Amazon Basin in 2019, aiming to expand regional cooperation and accelerate actions to conserve the Amazon ecosystems. What is the impact of the Leticia Pact 2 years on, and what challenges still lie ahead? Thank you.
Thank you, and hello everyone, and greetings to all the panelists. I'll come back to the Leticia Pact, I promise, because of what you said. I think is important, and it shows the potential of a mechanism like the Leticia Pact. My former boss, on one of his books, wrote, when you're talking about sustainable cities now, that Juan Pablo was talking about that we all like to think ourselves as unique, and we all indeed have different challenges and different problems until we get sick. When we want sick, we don't want a unique problem. We don't want a unique illness. We don't want a complicated one, right? We want the most standard and average sickness that there is, so it can be easily treatable. And a platform like the Leticia Pact is intended to get us together and collaborating on the things that we have in common and that we know that we need to deal with, and then on an individual basis, on the countries, we can tackle the things that are specific to a given territory. So 2 years after the Leticia Pact, we see an overall positive progress. We had 5, let's say, axes of work, and we have 16 mandates and 55 actions, and the implementation of the actions is going according to plan. We have complied with 30% of what we said we would do, and we are headed to have the 60% that was supposed to happen by year 2022, which is particularly for the President Duque when the term of the current Colombian government will end. Now, I think a lot of what was already mentioned by Javier, by Gustavo, and by Juan Pablo in terms of mobilizing resources, I think, of course, it's not going to take the credit because, you know, putting together these projects it takes a lot of time and a lot of work, but it starts creating a mechanism to channel all those needs in a more fluid fashion, and I think there is a big challenge in terms of, and also an opportunity, mainly an opportunity to start developing big regional projects. And I think the Amazon Sustainable Landscapes projects that, you know, finished the first phase with 4 countries, and now other 5 are joining in. So I think that shows already that the mechanism is working and is kind of delivering. Of course, particularly, and I think this was Javier left, but he had a very productive meeting with President Duque in Korea, and they were showing how, in this sense, the African countries are leading the way, and they are negotiating better, they're being more strategic, and I think that's a clear mandate for us, particularly to protect the Amazon. And again, I think what we are doing with the Leticia Pact helps putting that forward. We've seen Brazil announce a reduction at least halting, but a small reduction on deforestation the previous year. I think 5% was announced by President Bolsonaro. We're very happy to say, and President Duque said it here at the COP, that for the first semester we managed to reduce deforestation by 34%, and we're hoping to have even a larger number by the end of the year. That was only the first semester. We also managed to adopt a common framework to attend forest fires that I think is something important and is, let's say, unprecedented in the sense, not that it had not been done before in general, but particularly for the Amazon countries. And we've seen that forest fires accompany deforestation, and in that end, strengthening that line of work is a big opportunity, and it's been putting new items on the agenda, and I think it's been helping with the coordination of other larger projects. And of course, I mean, we always need to see that. In terms of challenges that you mentioned, and I'll finish with this, I think we would benefit on the establishment of a technical secretariat that would kind of get the things moving and have more momentum. Of course, we are working at all times with the OTCA organization as well, who is like a strong partner, have been leading the way for so many years. And I guess it's already time for us to start thinking about the next mandate, the next 55 actions, the next 5 axes, just to make sure that it encompasses all the things that have been put together and everything that we have accomplished, but also we need to set new ambitious goals. I was just, and that's why I came a bit late, I was in this other panel at the Action Room, and if you have been in this space, I highly recommend you to visit the Action Room as well. It's a very interesting space, and Carlos Manuel was mentioning that the 30 by 30 commitment, which, you know, a lot of countries have committed to, is not a high commitment. It's actually a minimum commitment. It's the absolute minimum that we need to do. And I bring that up because I think we need to have that mindset for the new actions and the new mandates that we build for the Leticia Pact. And in that end, we'll be aligned with something that we've been discussing all along and that everyone has been celebrating, which is the fact that nature, even though this is a climate change COP, nature has been at the center of it. And I think with the Leticia Pact, all the signatory countries can bring the two agendas together as they should be. And that should be, I think, one of the main challenges that lie ahead for us with the Leticia Pact.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister, for highlighting the importance of this and also for Colombia playing such an important role during these negotiations. It's important to see the leadership of Colombia in this process and how, as partners and as neighbors, all of the countries that are part of the Amazon basin can move together in this process and identify ways in which to support themselves and also have lessons learned based on what has been working and what doesn't work in this process. Thank you. So now let me go, and Andrea, welcome, and it's great to see that you made it. It's wonderful. Now let's go. Definitely science is important and is the basis of all of this process. So it's great to have you, Andrea. You are the co-chair of the science panel for the Amazon and professor at the University of San Francisco de Quito in Ecuador. So it's great to have another neighboring or part of the Amazon basin countries. Andrea, headlines these days indicate that the Amazon basin is on the brink of becoming a net source of greenhouse gas emissions, and Gustavo also mentioned this. In what way could this be a turning point for the Amazon region? You have the floor.
Thank you, Milagros, and thank you, everyone. I'm very sorry for being late. I was in Edinburgh, and it wasn't easy to get here. It took me more than 3 hours, so I didn't plan for this, but I'm very honored to be here with this great panel. And also, I'm very honored to be here in behalf of the 200 and more scientists that have participated in the report of the Science Panel for the Amazon. So we have finished it, and we will present it here in the COP. This is on the 12th, so you are all invited to go. And well, your question is very important because we all know how magnificent watershed the Amazon is. It's very critical for many factors, including the incredible biodiversity that it has, and also because of the forest. And people used to think about the Amazon basin only as a tropical rainforest, but it's way more than that. We have more than 50 different ecosystems that we have, coming from the Andes all the way to the lowlands. So it's pretty diverse on ecosystems, not only terrestrial, but aquatic ecosystems. And in terms of carbon, is incredibly important. And yes, in fact, our report and many of the scientists that have contributed to the writing of this report and systematizing this information have seen that a good portion of the Amazon right now are emitting CO2 emissions instead of sinking these emissions. So we're talking about 20% of the total area are becoming net source of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. This is huge. This is unprecedented, and this is already published. And we have already take this information and put it in the report, but this was already published by Luciana Gatti in a Nature paper. And this is very striking, because this means that the Amazon is basically emitting carbon dioxide, and this is very worrisome, because this means that for the future, we are very close to what we call a no-return point, tipping point. We're talking that when you change the amount of CO2 that you have in this space, you're also changing the amount of carbon that we are emitting, and of course this is having a huge impact in the whole ecosystem and how this ecosystem is reacting. So we all know the Amazon is a big water pump, and we're changing this water pump basically, and we are changing the climate patterns in the whole world, not just in the Amazon, but in the whole world. And basically what we're seeing with the predictions is that the south part of the Amazon is becoming drier, and the seasonal events are becoming more and more extreme. And for that reason, we are thinking that the south part of the Amazon is becoming a savanna. And this is changing really fast at unprecedented rates, faster than we thought. And the numbers are there, and we're seeing it. So we really think that we are in a crisis in the Amazon. The numbers are there, so we need to do something about it. There's still, we think, this window of opportunity to do something. However, this window of opportunity is short, so we need to do something fast, and we need to change. So we're very happy with the declaration of halt deforestation. However, we think that that is not enough. We do think that we need to do more things, more actions. There's not a single solution. There are many solutions. And we need to work on different fronts. And the only way is to work with the different countries that form the Amazon region. We are 8 countries and 1 territory. And all of us need to work together with different solutions, not just halt deforestation. But we need to, we really need to hear the people that live in the Amazon, because they have great information, and that's part of what we have learned also in the report on how to put scientific information together and knowledge of the people that live there. And this is critical to together make the difference on how we advance. As you were saying, there are many pillars on how to look for solutions on the Amazon. And as you all probably could imagine, putting together this report was not easy. People were working on different fronts. I'm a freshwater scientist, so I was working more on the river side of things, and how is the Amazon functioning and all the processes, the diversity, and so on. However, knowing how it functions, now we have a lot of information, which is great. However, it's not just how it functions and the problems that we have, but what are the solutions and the key messages that we could get from this information, and where are we walking from this. We think that the solutions, as I mentioned before, are not easy, and that there are many dimensions on these solutions. So we think that we should really talk about Amazon people rights, knowledge, and well-being. This is something very important. We need to recognize and protect indigenous and local people's rights. Also, within this dimension, people's livelihood and well-being need to improve, and that is something essential that we need to think within the solutions. We need to effectively implement knowledge dialogues and public participation in science. Also, we need intercultural education and capacity building to be accessible and supportive. And also, we need to cultivate cultural diversity and gender equality. That is the first dimension that we think is critical. The second dimension deals with governance and finance. We think that we need to design and implement knowledge-based policies. Also, guarantee effective civil society participation in decision-making. Also, sustainable orient global partnership for resources and financial investments, and also implement multilateral Amazonian coordination for illegal activities so they are curbed. The third pillar and the third dimension that we think is critical is, of course, management, conservation, and restoration. We need to manage effectively protected areas networks, also implement innovative approaches for conservation and restoration, also conserve, restore, and use sustainable aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems, and also restore and maintain the resilience and the landscape connectivity. And the fourth dimension that we think is very important that you already mentioned is bioeconomy of healthy forests and rivers. And for this, we need to implement inclusive models for the use of biological resources, connect and expand scientific, indigenous, and local knowledge, organize and assure fair markets and share benefits, and stimulate equitable development of rural and urban economies. We think also that it's very important to define what we mean by bioeconomy, because we don't really think that is only an economic sector. It synthesizes the set of ethical normative values on the relationship between society and nature and their consequences. So for this is critical, the fair sharing that I talked before. If we really want to have bioeconomies in the Amazon, it's going to be critical that we do this in a fair way. I invite you again to go to the launch of the report. Many of us are going to be there. People that have be part of the authors of this panel, and I'm very glad to be here with all of you.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you for highlighting this and how the science is speaking to us about the urgency of conserving, of supporting these processes. And I think you mentioned something very important, that is the blending of the science and traditional knowledge. This is definitely important and a very important basis of the Amazon countries. and of our health, of our food security. So definitely that is important. So based on time and to have a discussion later with colleagues that probably have questions, I would like to invite you to step down and sit down with us so that I can bring the second part of the panel into the room. Thank you very much. So I invite Marco van der Rie as well as Denise Hills so that we can also discuss. Thank you very much. Okay. So let's go straight to the questions, Marco and Denise. Marco, let's start with you. We know that public finance alone cannot close the funding gap needed for keeping the Amazon standing. How is TNC addressing the existing barriers that prevent private investment from funding climate change, mitigation, and adaptation at a scale in the Amazon?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for the invitation to be here and represent the Nature Conservancy at this panel. It's great to see and listen to all the presentations of the other panel members and realize we've been working with all of them over the past decades in Latin America in multiple Amazonian countries, and it's really a collaborative and collective effort in order to be able to deliver results. The point I think you want to ask me is how can we really get more additional private finance to solve these different problems? The point is we did a study last year on the biodiversity finance gap at the global scale, and that set the total lack of funding or the total funding needed to actually really deal with the biodiversity loss and crisis at about 700 billion a year. So that's at the global scale. If you take the importance of the Amazon out of that, and I don't have the exact number, I don't think we did that study, we probably can pick about 15% of that and say, well, we need about 100 billion a year in order to be able to work on the bioeconomy and a sustainable economy in the Amazon as a whole, and that includes then all the halting deforestation programs, the restoration programs, the bioeconomy programs, etc. So I think the gap is enormous. And the public funding from GCF, from GEF, from IDB is essential, and we should be able to try to use that in such a way to really unlock private sector funding that can come in order to support that. So how can we actually do that in a more coherent way? I think Juan Pablo already mentioned very much the blended finance model, and I think that's how you look at it. So you use public funding to de-risk certain private sector investments to come on board, and I think that's really a process to go. So the other important point I wanted to make is another report came out last year from Swiss Re, which indicated that 55% of the global GDP is actually dependent in one way or another on biodiversity. So it just shows how important nature and biodiversity is, and we need to work on this topic, and therefore nature-based solutions should be really at the center. So how can we find the nature-based solutions, support those with this public-private funding, and I think Natura can speak about it in a lot more detail as well. But I think those are the ones that we need to go after. The 35% of climate solutions that we have in our hands should come and can come from nature. So the Amazon, in that sense, plays a very important role. About the different types of barriers that we see and we try to work on, I think first of all is the economic one, and they're very similar to the four pillars that Andrea mentioned here. Is the economic one? We don't measure the value of nature in our economy. The externalities of our economy are not representative in the prices. So how can we really put the price on products and incorporate the negative externalities and include the positive externalities in that? I think that's a critical one, and therefore we work on that. We work with large producers in the Amazon region, cattle and soy. How can you have deforestation-free beef and soy? How can you have sustainable intensification rather than the expansion of the agricultural frontier. There's no need for expanding the agricultural frontier. There's enough degraded land that can be reused, can be intensified, and therefore you can halt deforestation. I was in the team that did the evaluation of the Amazon Fund, 10 years of the Norwegian support and German support to Brazil. And this was really one of the key outcomes as well, to really say, how can you do agriculture intensification in a sustainable way, thereby not having the pressure on opening up new lands. So these are the areas that we work on, and we launched this week as TNC the IFAC, which is the innovative finance for the Amazon, the Cerrado, and the Chaco, with $3 billion US dollars in funding from large corporations coming along and trying to do just that. So that is one area. The other area, of course, is a political barrier and legislative barrier, both at the regional level, national level, and state or provincial level. How you want to do that? I want to say that, and that really needs to work with governments on trying to say, okay, what are the markets are going to be? Because if you want to crowd in private sector finance, there needs to be certainty about how the rules are going to be and what the rules are. In carbon markets, how do they work, what is included, what is not, offsets, how are they being calculated, what is the quality of them, and so forth and so forth. We need to look at those, and how can you then have much more clear policy. I think the Leticia Pact is driving towards that and trying to get those answers. And we try to work with partners across the Amazon region in multiple countries. But an example is in the state of Pará in Brazil, where we have a systemic approach. We try to really work with all the different types of stakeholders there: government, smallholders, NGOs, other civil society, indigenous populations, businesses. If we want a systemic change for the Amazon, and which is what we need, because I think the challenges and the thresholds that you are referring to are well, maybe we're already past them, so we really need to pedal back very fast. So we need to have a systemic approach and incorporate and develop those programs where you can really incorporate all those different actors. And lastly, the third barrier is the social ones, and you also mentioned that really have to be very important. The Amazon is a very special and amazing region with so much different types of culture, indigenous populations and local cultures, and then had the privilege to work there in the past and see it. We really need to work across with those and have with those populations and have all the safeguards in place that their rights are being met, that the human rights, indigenous rights are being met, and therefore, from GSE perspective, we have a long-standing programs and projects in the region as well, where we work with indigenous peoples and try to safeguard those rights. So I want to keep it to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for highlighting some issues related to the legal security and to how we can address this also with support of different actors. Definitely, I realize that Colombia and Peru are working very much alike in bringing this legal security to different actors, to different stakeholders, including the private sector, civil society, but especially indigenous peoples with the work on safeguards. That is definitely important, and that is the enabling condition, the basis of supporting these processes. So let's go now to my next speaker. Thank you again, Denise, for coming and bringing in the private sector roles perspective. You are the Sustainability Director of Natura, which definitely, who doesn't know Natura in Latin America? It's totally popular. The corporate sector plays a key role in the bioeconomy value chains. How is Natura supporting sustainable sourcing of the Amazon's biodiversity and therefore contributing to the bioeconomy in the region?
Thanks for the opportunity for inviting me to give an example of how things in the Amazon can be. It's an honor to be here and listening about so many studies, so many knowledge, so many things that are happening in the Amazon. For who knows Amazon, you can imagine a place that has more than 4,800 indigenous population, almost half of that never heard a long contact with a human like us. You have like a biodiversity that we do not even have a clue of how valued. And the first time people, like when I came to Natura some years ago, they asked me about the value of the biodiversity and what we are having in Amazon, the fire, the deforestation. For me, the correct answer at that time, it was like, we are burning Mona Lisa. We are burning something that we do not even devalue. So that's why we are here. I think Natura has a long time experience in the Amazon. We've been working on the Amazon in the last 20 years. One of the most iconic products comes, or brands, comes from the Amazon, the Ecos line, and works only with the biodiversity of the Amazon. Names like Ucuba, Murumuru, or Patawa, which means the traditional names of fruits or seeds of the Amazon, with a unique combination using bioeconomy, traditional populations as part of the how could we bring together development, research, innovation, the innovation in technology, in biotechnology, together with the traditional knowledge, and at the same time, knowing the systems brings this in a value chain that invests a lot in the development, not only for the products, but into the population, into the guarantee that this kind of a sustainable approach not only has for Natura a unique opportunity to give to take part of the world. Now we are a company that has a representation in 110 countries in the world, sorry. And Natura is one of the representatives that Amazon's brings us the innovation and the knowledge, and the consumers knows it, recognize this. And when we say like, it comes from the Amazon, it seems like, wow. So I would like to point 2 or 3 things about these especially questions. I'll give you an example of one of these ingredients, ucuba, which means, the local population used to say that they are the pearl of the Amazon because the unique way they are growing down and cuts and goes to the river. It's a very nice seed. So the ucuba tree, it was in the extinction list when we became a part of the study to develop another way to use or discover the potential of the ingredient. It was like you receive like 10 reais, which means like $1 if you cut the tree, and in order to address another way to develop the bioeconomy of the forest using the knowledge, tradition, and paying for this, we start a journey developing a product by the ucuba, which is one of the most important, most rising product that you have all over the world. And nowadays, you've been one of the most important value chain that we already has in Natura, because for one tree cut and $1 or pound received, you have like the same tree preserved, and you are receiving like 100 pounds per year. That's the way that you value and regenerated in developing a value chain that promotes not only the preservation or the restoration of the Amazon, but more money, more guarantee, paying for not only for the research, but paying for the traditional knowledge, and usually gives back again the other parts of the amazing service that the ecosystems has to provide in us. As many of you knows, and my previous colleagues mentioned, Amazon is essential in the fighting of climate change. There is no way to solve climate change without solving the problem and preserving and regenerate the Amazon. And that's why we can look through the unique combination of development, innovation, technology with traditional population in order to bring them the real value for the knowledge, for the social biodiversity. You used to mention it because it's not only about the biodiversity. People were still there. So in order to look into this biome, how can we generate a new way to address a development, but that respects and value at the same time the unique characteristics that we already have at that system. I think the Natura has the example of this. There are many of enchanted histories about it, but it's proved that it's not only a way that is difficult, that it's impossible, that can't be done, or you have nowadays the sufficient knowledge about the Amazon, and we all know the importance of it. And I would like to think about myself and our company as an example of things that can be done and could be scale up. And partnership, knowledge, work together with the governments and the NGOs and the whole system that promotes a social and environmental development for the bioeconomy of the system. It's essential to bring us, especially of the pandemic recovery, a green and inclusive approach, including for businesses and economic development for the Amazon. Especially, one more point, if Amazon is essential for the climate change, one of the ways of thinking about the forest is carbon, the approach of carbon. Climate change could bring us another fount of the resources, including for this population, which are now preserving the forest, that relieves to us, that leaves to us an essential capacity, which is living, like with water, with air, we're a lot of things that we allows us to not only make businesses, but live not only in Brazil, not only in Latin America, but in the whole world. 40% of the ability of having an event like this with air, clean air, or oxygen comes from the forest. So I think that it's not a matter of the forest, it's a matter of understand the real opportunity. And I'm very excited to be in a COP, as an evolution at Paris COP15, because bring action and knows that now we have the essence of the technology, we should have more commitment and we should have more action and we should have together in commitment action in order to address the real challenge that we already have. And it can be done. It can be done. Okay?
Thank you very much, Denise. And I think it's important to highlight the role that the private sector has and which you are representing here. But not only the private sector, the international private sector from the Amazon region, but the private sector within the Amazon region, such as Natura, that has been a game changer for many populations, for many indigenous peoples, bringing in this traditional knowledge and how that can link to markets, right? And how we have also, from the cities, been understanding the importance of these ecosystem services that the Amazon brings to us. Now I have a few minutes for some questions from the floor. Colleagues, if somebody would like to ask a question to our distinguished panel, the floor is open. Thank you. And please, can you say who the question is for? And
actually, it's not a question directed to anyone in particular, but please feel free to answer it. I'm curious to know what kind of mechanisms are being put in place to make sure that the indigenous communities that are stewards of the land are actually receiving the benefits. It's a very broad and general question, but I'm very keen on understanding the mechanics of how they receive the benefits.
May I start, if I could?
Okay, let's take another question, and then we can go. And I can invite the panelists to join again the seats. See, there's 3 seats, so you can sit. Okay.
So, hello. Just would like to know, how do you believe you can deal when you have federal government or government backlash, especially when we need to preserve forests for a long time? So maybe we are saying that we are selling carbon now, but to maintain forests until 2050. And we have a lot of governments coming. Sometimes we have a huge backlash, as we have in Brazil now. So how can you deal How can we deal with this one in a long time? How do you think about it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Denise, you would like to
I'd
be the
like to
first?
start for
Wonderful.
the first one. Sharing benefits. I think it's one of the way that you can use, not only in order to guarantee that the money comes directly for the population or the group that generates the benefit, and it's one of the most important things that we've been doing, including before the regulation. Natura has paying for sharing benefits. At first, even we do not have the law in Brazil. We've been starting our recognition that it's so essential in order not only to value, but in order to guarantee the resilience of the value chain, which is the resilience of our model. Now we have like the regulation, especially in Brazil, which is we have the most part of the Amazon. We create a monetary fund by government that enhance the ability or the responsibility of the whole people, which are negotiations and partnerships and knowledge bringing for the Amazon, has the opportunity to over there to take part, to pay by this. I think what we point how could we make the guarantee that the money not only exists but goes for essentially of the population? That's our pushing actions with the regulation nowadays, because our contracts that comes before the regulation has the guarantees that when I pay this money, I know that you are generating this knowledge, and we discussing, including with the population, the better way to use this money that comes for education, that goes to the many things that enhance the ability and the development of these economies in the normal way. I think it's one of the most important things. The regulations are not specific about this. And in order to guarantee that we explicit knows for whom the money goes, because we know where the knowledge comes from, our contract goes like this. We use this contract using a way to guarantee community by community, a way to put this. But it's a challenge. In order to have a huge fund that commits all of our, embrace the sharing benefit or Nagoya Protocol and the ABS payments as general, we have to have structures like this. But it is one of the most important things that includes the resilience of the model. Because if you have a fund with a lot of money and the money does not go with the correct technical assistance included in order to generate real benefit, you're not paying for anything, you are not developing, in fact, the essential of sharing benefits and value the knowledge, the traditional knowledge. It's a very important point. And we are enhance our activities in Nagoya Protocol, in ABS, sharing benefits, not only for until here, but for the next biodiversity discussion.
Thank you very much, Denise. And maybe I would like to give the floor to answer the second question. Gustavo, would you like to answer?
Thank you. Obrigado pela pergunta. So this question is very relevant, and it addresses the fact that initiatives like trying to conserve the Amazon or helping to conserve the Amazon, they are not restricted to one single government. They are national projects that have to last for a long time. And this is what we've learned for the 30 years that the GEF has been working in the region. And I'll tell you just one example to illustrate how important it is that these programs have continuity and that they have a long-term horizon when they are conceived and then when they are designed. I mentioned earlier on about the protected areas of the Amazon, the ARPA program. The ARPA program has what's called a transition fund that was capitalized by the GEF, by WWF, by the German government, by private sector. And this fund is a sinking fund that operates over 25 years and progressively transfers the management costs of protected areas from the fund to the national budget. So that helps to create a long-term commitment by the governments to work on that, and it's against commitments to have activities in place every year and budgets in place every year. What happened in the current situation? So we all know that the current government has gone through some difficulties and challenges, but the only lifeline for those protected areas, for all those 117 protected areas, has been the transition fund. So the transition fund is making sure that there is a lifeline that supports park personnel, that supports vehicles, enforcement, and these areas are still performing very well against deforestation. A recent analysis, a remote sensing analysis, showed that the deforestation side protected areas that have been funded by ARPA is significantly less than those that are not supported by ARPA or for places that are outside the protected area system. So we have to look at this not from a 4-year perspective. Unfortunately, we are funded every 4 years. The GCF is funded every 3 years. But we need to have programs that persist over time. When we start doing this, and the IDB and Juan Pablo mentioned this, we're not here for the next 4 or 5 years or for the life of a program. We need to be here for decades to go. So that's the only way that this is going to be achieved.
Thank you very much, Gustavo, and I'll give the floor to Marco so that you have a microphone. Yeah. Wonderful, Marco, you have the floor.
Yeah, I would like to add to that on the question from a different perspective. What I think is interesting, and we see that again at the COP here, what is changing at the global level with global supply chains and how companies are dealing with that, and that it has an influence on production at the global scale. So as I mentioned earlier, soy production in Brazil or Argentina, the whole question on deforestation-free soy is coming up more and more, and that is influencing actual behavior of companies on the ground. And I think we see a lot of that happening. We see, for example, in Europe also with the Green Deal, a very strong movement to much more transparency and need for transparency from companies through sustainability reporting. There's a directive that came out as a draft earlier this year and will be adopted next year, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. I used to work with the Global Reporting Initiative and been very closely engaged in that. That is really going to enforce European companies to be completely transparent or very transparent about their supply chains globally and their partners they work with around the world. So that is even going to impact global supply chains, and therefore you see businesses changing their behavior, wanting to change their investments because they want to be able to deliver sustainable products as well. So I think that those things we see happening now at the global scale and from Europe and in other places, we can have an effect even when local governments are not necessarily directly cooperating with that, but businesses, and I think Natura sees that, see it as a business opportunity to do that, and from an innovative perspective. And one last point to mention is that with IDB on innovation, there's also so much innovation happening at the local level and local young entrepreneurs in the Amazon region with new products and working with associations and indigenous populations developing those type of products that we need to support more, and those entrepreneurs will then also drive much more sustainable action.
Thank you very much, Marco. And Juan Pablo for the close.
No, thank you, Milagros. I think the question of beneficiaries is very good. It's very complex at the same time, because listening to different actors in the Amazon, that question has different derivatives, I would say. As Denise mentioned, I think the value chain approach is going to be key in one level. We had a challenge for bioeconomy already with WEF, and we had identified at least 80 very good companies for bioeconomy in the Amazon. And I was very happy to see that one of the first groups that we saw, many of them have already signed contracts with Natura, right? Just to give you an idea. So that's one level, and that's one of the key issues that we want to start doing, as I mentioned, with BitLab, with our Lab of Innovation, to create that ecosystem and then make the link with value chains. The second part is indigenous communities, and I'm going to be very humble here. I said to all the representatives of COICA yesterday, I want to learn from you. Because they said, listen, we don't want to use the word beneficiaries anymore. We want to co-create, and we want to have direct access. We want to be partners of the companies. So we need to be very careful when we're talking with indigenous groups in the Amazon to continue talking about beneficiaries. We need to start also thinking about a big change on that. And lastly, very poor communities in the Amazon. Something that we want to try at the bank is using mechanisms that were used for the social part in the past. Conditional transfers, non-conditional transfers, for health, for education, for piloting agroforestry issues. We had a pilot in Brazil with the Ministry of Agriculture. It was called low carbon agriculture with the UK, and we've learned a lot. But it's something that we need to pilot, is how you can transfer a non-conditional transfer and then a conditional transfer for very poor communities in the Amazon, and how you track that. Many of them didn't even have an account. So that's another level. So that's why I like the question, because we need a lot of level to address, and it's very complex, but that's the way to go.
Thank you very much, Juan Pablo, and thank you very much to the panel. I really enjoyed listening to your answers and also to the floor. I'd just like to finish up this panel and recall the exceptional global significance of the Amazon. As Andrea mentioned, and definitely this is the basis of everything, the science, the Amazon provides services not only for the region, but for the entire world. And recalling a little bit the title of this session, The Amazon We Chose, you have all highlighted the importance of the different stakeholders that are part of the Amazon, of the different countries that live, that are part of the Amazon, and especially to indigenous peoples, local communities, and different stakeholders that are part of this process. So definitely this type of collaborations between the GCF and the GEF are important to address these processes, as well as I would like to, obviously, as my role also as a government, I would like to highlight the efforts of countries, but not just of the governments, but of all the stakeholders that live in, including civil society, including the private sector, to reduce deforestation. We are tackling an issue that is definitely difficult and challenging, and this has to be tackled throughout different perspectives with the support of the different stakeholders that are part of this process and of the Amazon, and definitely there's a need for new and additional funding. So in such case, the role of everybody is important in this process. Thank you very much.